Hello, hello.
Welcome.
Let everybody roll in. Folks showing up, if you guys want to post who you are, what organization you're with in the chat so we can get a gauge for everyone in the room today. We're going to give it a couple minutes here.
Yeah, and if you guys want to throw in where you're from too, we would love to see that as well.
I like that. And opinions on John Mayer.
Opinions on John Mayer. We were just discussing John Mayer before before we open this up.
We have 90% John Mayer content today.
Every allegory to year-end fundraising is going to be made through the lens of John Mayer. So just get ready.
Mhm. Think of Bitcoin like John Mayer.
Think of a Facebook ad like a John Mayer concert.
Awesome.
We'll give it just maybe 2 more minutes and then we can get going. I know we got a lot of content to get through today.
Seeing a lot of folks from all over. Not seeing a lot of John Mayer related commentary, but that's okay. We'll warm up into that. Awesome. Give it another minute. Still see numbers creeping up here.
Virginia Beach, we got a Portland in here. That's awesome. Oh, Jill, thanks for joining us from Asia Wild. Awesome.
We have like the whole country covered right now. It's good. Okay. I think we're good to get started. Some people are still rolling in.
Perfect. Yeah, that's how webinars generally go. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining Pat and myself today as we really go through kind of a combined year-end giving playbook between Community Boost and the Giving Block. We'll talk a little bit more about who Community Boost is, who Giving Block is, so you have a bit more context there. But really today we want to share our thoughts on how you can maximize donations in it's not even arguably the most important time of year for nonprofits who are focused on fundraising. It just definitely is. And we're going to walk you through our perspective on how you can squeeze the most out of that today. So I can introduce myself first. My name is Michael Goodrum. I am the director of our client service team here at Community Boost. So I have over 7.5 years doing direct digital marketing for nonprofits in the space. I actually grew up here as more of an account manager, so really on the front lines with our clients, thinking through strategy, thinking through how do we want to glue all these different marketing channels, all the opportunity out there together in a way that's going to drive the strongest results in terms of fundraising. And now, do oversee the kind of entire client service team. And Pat.
Awesome. I'm Pat Duffy. I'm one of our co-founders at the Giving Block. We started in 2018 with cryptocurrency fundraising solutions. We now do crypto, stock, and then DAF grant acceptance for nonprofits. Just make it easy for charities to take it on their sites. And yeah, primarily on my side, I do a lot of the focus for our team on fundraising strategies and some of the product development work.
Awesome. And that's a great segue, Pat, to just share a little bit more about Giving Block and what you guys do there.
Yeah, absolutely. So at a high level, the main thing that we focus on is not only providing solutions for nonprofits to take cryptocurrency, stock, DAF, et cetera, but putting nonprofits in a position to actually drive revenue through them. So early on, pioneering the crypto philanthropy movement was a big part of what we did. We created the nonprofit industry's annual crypto philanthropy report. We created Crypto Giving Tuesday. We created the platform on our website, which is the main aggregator of charities that take crypto. It became kind of the spot on the internet people go to send cryptocurrency to nonprofits and search for the ones who take it. And then over time, we expanded into stock and DAF just because the tax incentive alignment was similar. A lot of our crypto donors had appreciated stock. They'd give that sometimes, crypto sometimes. And most of our time is spent kind of going past the product component, making sure that nonprofits make these solutions easy to find on their website, search engine optimize, put it in front of donors, and find strategic strategies, I guess, to put them in front of their audiences, earning net new donors on Twitter, and then putting in emails, QR codes in the back of a direct mailer, open a pamphlet at Gala, crypto stock and DAFR there to try to increase the overall volume.
That's incredible. Yeah. And excited to learn more today too about just how, it feels, although crypto is not necessarily new, it certainly sometimes feels new for the nonprofit space at times, and like really how the people in this webinar and those who watch it later can make sure they're showing up in that space as powerfully as they can be.
Definitely.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know Community Boost, we are a digital marketing agency that works only with nonprofits. So we've been around for a little over 12 years at this point. And looking back just at really last year, we helped drive over $50 million in donation revenue for the partners that we work with. We've worked with over 500 nonprofits in varying capacities, but work directly with them. We also do host the largest marketing event for nonprofits twice per year in the digital marketing or the nonprofit marketing summit, which is this 50,000 here. And ultimately, we think of ourselves as social entrepreneurs first and digital marketers second, where we currently believe that the best way that we can help as many the incredible organizations and many of the people like yourselves on this call is through digital marketing. And so that's what we do. And we're really, really honored to work with some of the the largest organizations out there, like Save the Children, Charity Water, Souls for Souls, Cancer Research Institute, but then also work with a large number of organizations at that more local chapter or community level too, and kind of everything in between. So it's an honor to have everyone here today. And I kind of mentioned the Nonprofit Marketing Summit. Do want to just let everyone know that we are proud to announce the dates of the Nonprofit Marketing Summit coming up in March. So that's going to be March 5th through 7th. And you can, if you would like, use that QR code that's right there on the screen. And we are on a journey next year to create unthinkable impact, unthinkable results, and turning that into a reality. So I was, to be honest, completely blown away by some of the speakers and some of the sessions that we had at the previous summit. So we probably get more of a plug on that towards the end. I definitely want to dive into the content, but it's free to register, you guys, and it's an incredibly high impact event. Plus, if you enjoy hearing from me today, I will also be running some sessions there, so you'll just get to hear more of my beautiful voice. So let's talk about year end. And why are we running an entire 90-minute webinar on year end? At the end of the day, like, it's kind of wild how important this time of year has become, especially when we think of US-based nonprofits. We see across the board 31% of all annual charitable giving happening in December, with a really incredible spike in the last 3 days, which is about 10% of all the gifts that a nonprofit receives happen in the last 3 days of the year, with December 31st, of course, being like the largest day of giving. And we've seen that even in like all of our Google Analytics views, like all of the e-commerce views that we've put together and combined over the years. This trend stays exactly the same. I'm sure Giving Block sees it too. We see 12 times more donors being acquired on Giving Tuesday specifically, which is really like, when we think of kicking off year end, we generally think of it kicking off with that Giving Tuesday than any other day of the year. We have a much more high likelihood of renewing lapsed donors during the holiday season, and then the social media campaigns are significantly more effective, with the potential to engage more than 5 times the supporters of a normal campaign. So today, Pat and I are going to kind of bounce back and forth between each other through this agenda. So we're going to first talk about the year-end fundraising timeline. So when we say year-end, what do we mean? What are the different phases of it? How would we recommend your organization think about it from a timeline and execution perspective? We're then going to get into some of the top year-end fundraising strategies that are out there, and kind of spread that between fundraising strategies in itself and then also marketing strategies, which will be that next topic, and then how you can actually go about creating your own year-end fundraising plan, based off of everything that we talked about today. So we would love to know, like from a poll perspective, you should have just seen a poll pop up on your screen, where you and your organization is at when it comes to your year-end fundraising plans for 2023. And we'll just let some of this pop in. Really appreciate if you guys are able to answer this. It gives Pat and I context for really the rest of this conversation to make sure it's tailored to everyone who's in the room with us. So seeing kind of the leading responses here being having a plan, but there's room to improve, which is great. And then also have an idea of what we want to do, but don't have it all in line or like planned out. And then just kind of even responses between have a plan, fully prepared. High five to those of you who are have the plan and are fully prepared. Maybe you can hop in the chat and teach us some things as well as we go along here. And then for you, those of you who don't have a plan or are here to learn, you're absolutely in the right place. Thank you everyone so much for popping those answers in there. We really do have a pretty even spread. So let's dive into when we say year-end fundraising timeline, like what that consists of, what it looks like. And for some of you, especially those who are, I have an idea, but I don't have it all planned out. I have a plan, but there's room to improve. You know, at the end of the day, year ends, when you're coming into it without a plan, can feel a little bit like winter is coming. It can feel, I mean, it's literally winter, at least for us on the northern hemisphere, but also Jon Snow in the sense of like, wow, we don't feel prepared for this. There's a lot of unknowns. We know that it's daunting and it's ultimately coming. There's nothing we can do about it, but like, how are we going to gather our forces together to actually tackle this thing? Of course, it can create a lot of stress. It can feel like you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants, right? Doing what you can with the resources that you have allocated, and knowing that just by kind of getting things in last minute or doing them just to get them done is ultimately going to lead to missed opportunities, which of course in turn creates more stress. Oftentimes too, we hear, you know, there's not really a way to keep track of success. So we set goals. Were those goals correct that we set? Like, how do we actually, at the end of the day, know that we won or we didn't win? And then also knowing that, of course, if we're not here with a strong bulletproof plan, there are a lot of other nonprofits out there that do have that more bulletproof plan. And while we're all, like, I know Giving Block and Community Boost are both committed to more individuals giving, like more of the GDP being donated every year, there still are, of course, a finite amount of people out there looking to give. And if your plan isn't in place, you may miss out on up to thousands of gifts for your organization. But today, we're wanting to be a lot more like Tyrion. We're wanting to be a lot more on the mindset of forging those alliances, looking out forward so that we can deal with winter as it comes. And ultimately, year end with a plan is something we want to dance on. Hopefully, we don't feel shackled like Tyrion is in this GIF here. But we want to be in a world that's easy to follow and easy to delegate tasks, taking a process-oriented approach to help you take advantage of all of the opportunities that we talked about in terms of the giving and everything that happens in December. A world where success is easy to track, and knowing how you performed across different areas of opportunity played out for you, and that you're also set up to meet and then ideally even exceed your fundraising goals that you have. So in terms of the cadence of giving for year-end fundraising, and I would also argue that this is kind of the cadence of almost any core fundraising campaign your organization would run, but focusing it on year-end, right? Typically, we're going to see this period of initial excitement where in terms of year-end, that's going to be Giving Tuesday. That's also going to be the donors that your organization has strong involvement with, who the second that the campaigns go live, are being capitalized on, right? And when I say capitalized, I don't necessarily mean the people, but I mean the momentum, the energy, the excitement that you've been building. The gates open to give and to get involved. We generally are going to see a large volume at the beginning of this campaign period. And then, like we talked about, those last 3 days of the year are also going to be when we're really capitalizing on a lot of the urgency, right? It's the end of 2023. It's time to actually make your gift now to create whatever impact you're looking to create through us, the organization, next year. But really, the period where there's oftentimes some struggle in a year-end giving campaign is the trough in the middle, right? Where the excitement has died out, the sense of urgency from the time period ending soon has not yet arrived, And we call this the inevitable trough that comes in where we oftentimes see a lull in giving during a campaign. Um, and so in terms of avoiding that trough, and I'm also curious too, like I probably won't be able to monitor the chat too much, but if you're like resonating with this, if you're like, yeah, I like we see that too. We see a large spike at the beginning, we see a, you know, at the end too, but really kind of keeping things going consistent through the middle is something we struggle with. Would love to just probably when Pat jumps in, I'll kind of take a look at the chat, but curious, um, when we talk about the trough and like how we can avoid it, ultimately, are we ever necessarily going to uh, see the same volume that we're seeing at the initial excitement period? Usually not, right? We're not necessarily going to see that, but we are going to absolutely smooth out the peaks and valleys of a giving season for ourselves. And doing this correctly also is going to result in a larger end of the period time for us too. And we see that happen through digital marketing, through advertising, and through really powerful storytelling and with that plan that we were talking about earlier. So when we think of the year-end timeline, you know, at Community Boost, this is a playbook we've been developing for a number of years, and at this point is kind of our, for lack of a better word, Bible in how we approach year-end with the organizations we work with. Um, the first phase is what we call pre-wire and gratitude. So I'll get into all of this in just a little bit, like what each of these phases means. But phase one is pre-wire and gratitude that occurs from October 1st to right up until Giving Tuesday. Phase two is actually like Giving Tuesday, kicking off that initial excitement period and then into the trough of December giving. Phase three is urgency and remarketing, where that's kind of like the last 10, could be like at the last 10 days to the last week of the year. Phase four is where we enter into gratitude. So we are going to be thanking the individuals who contributed and supported the campaign. And then, of course, we're nonprofits who are doing fundraising. So it doesn't just end with year end. We also need to be thinking about how do we keep that momentum going into next year, and what new campaigns are we ultimately launching as we get into March and beyond in phase six. So the heck do we mean by all these different phases? So looking at, you know, from October through November, pre-wire is where we are generating excitement for the ultimate upcoming year-end campaign. And that can look like such a variety of different things. That can mean we are engaging people who don't currently know about us with stories of impact, with information that's going to have them feel more warm and have a relationship built with our nonprofit's brand when it comes time to make that initial ask. It also can mean pre-wiring current people who are already part of your audience, starting to kind of drip them little elements of what your year-end campaign is going to look like. If you have a theme, it's where you can sort of kind of tease some of the theme of the campaign. And you know, the ultimate goal here is to drive engagement. I think a fallacy that can happen in the nonprofit space and can happen in the for-profit space too is when we go direct to conversion with people. Without building any kind of relationship, we make the ask, when there are likely many other organizations out there that this person has heard of who have been making the effort to build that relationship. Pre-wire is a very coordinated effort to, in a quick period of time, locate people who are likely to have an affinity with your mission and create familiarity with you and create value for them create value for you from their perspective, with that relationship. And then what we also want to be doing in this October through November phase is gratitude. So we talked about ending with gratitude. We also want to start with gratitude. This is going to be specifically for your current audience, where we're building a like retargeting campaign across the different platforms that you're occupying, where we're literally thanking people for supporting your mission all year. That is something pretty unique to the playbook that we run here at Community Boost that I don't see a lot of nonprofits outside doing. Highly recommend actually spending some resources in terms of building the emails and even spending some ad dollars on literally thanking your audience. And we definitely want that to go to your core key constituents who actively contribute to you, but we also want that to ideally go to those who even engage with you on social, right? Like there is value, and it also doesn't cost that much to reach those people. There is value for those who are keeping your presence and your brand alive, who are sharing it. So ideally you're involving all of those people in the gratitude period. Um, and then yeah, you also want to pre-wire Giving Tuesday. So Giving Tuesday is coming. Most people who are, orbiting the nonprofit space are aware of that. We do want to be running engagement campaigns and essentially letting people know, hey, Giving Tuesday is coming for our organization. We are focusing on it this year. Here's, if you have any kind of theme, or you're looking to raise, you like maybe crowdfund a certain amount to achieve something with your mission. You want to be letting people know about that ahead of time, because it is one of the most expensive times of year to advertise, with Black Friday, Cyber Monday. I just heard about Travel Tuesday yesterday, which like frustrates me. It's on the same day as Giving Tuesday, like going to further drive up ad costs. So we want people to be as aware of what you're planning to achieve on Giving Tuesday through their support as possible. We want to be sharing that ahead of time with them. And then, of course, Giving Tuesday hits.
Michael, real quick on that, just on the
Yeah,
slide you're on, can I throw a couple
sure.
yes ands on the
Please.
stuff that you're saying
Absolutely.
here? So I mean,
Anytime.
it's two pretty small things, but like Michael talking about this with the pre-wire component. Like we talk about this a lot with our nonprofits. Like we fundraise from investors, right? Crypto, stock donations. These are usually like $5,000 to $10,000 average gift size. Um, these types of transactions in particular, but all donations, right? They don't make that choice on the fly. Like Michael's hitting on it. Like when you're trying to show up, tell them where the money's going, why it matters, and get them to convert whatever they're doing. They're taking a walk, they're at work, they're on a bike. Like it's if they're seeing it all at once, right? It's hard for them to process all that information. And for things like crypto and stock, we're extra careful about it, right? Because they might need to like whitelist a wallet address that they're sending crypto to, or talk to their advisor about the tax implications. Like if you show up and they don't know the match dollars are coming and there's a particular day to give, or what they're going to be giving, for us it's a big deal, but for all donors, right? If you tell them we're about to raise a bunch of money to do this specific thing, build schools, feed children, and on this day you can make a donation and it'll be matched whatever else it is, you prime donors to be ready to make a choice, and then ultimately they convert at a higher rate. It also helps you spread out the messaging. And then the only other thing is the gratitude piece. Like gratitude is social proof. It's not, I think some nonprofits view it almost as like not a waste of a message, but it's a lack of, you're choosing to thank donors instead of encourage donors to give. Gratitude is like one of the best ways that we see donors get encouraged to give. The most effective fundraising campaigns we see from nonprofits are them highlighting previous successes. When they talk about a big donation that came through, or they say, hey, last year people gave us, $330,000 in crypto. This is a part of our funding model. We want to see it be a part of our funding model moving forward. That's gratitude, right? You thank the donors in there, but it's also social proof. Like if you want people to give, showing people that others are giving is like one of the best ways to do it. So I love the slide and just wanted to piggyback.
Thanks, Pat. No, I think that was tremendous. And it also made me think of another yes and off of what you shared too. And just that when it comes to the ways that we're used to communicating with our donors and with our community, like the 99% of the marketing that those people interact with on a weekly basis is asking for something, right? It's of course, right? And like we live in a world where there's almost like digital fatigue of how many ads are out there and how many asks are being made of us. So to deliver something in someone's, whether it's an email, their news feed, whatever, however you're choosing to do it, that has nothing but like thanking them specifically, is such a different psychological experience for people too, that we're hoping that the more people that attend these webinars start to implement these strategies in the nonprofit space, but for now it's probably still pretty unheard of. So even just from that perspective and needing to stand out this year end, creating space and putting resources and dollars behind gratitude is going to be a huge win. Yeah, and for Giving Tuesday, it of course serves as that launch point for what we see outwardly as like year-end fundraising. It's kind of like when we start to measure return on ad spend, like ROI of, even if it's like an organization working with an agency, ROI of like that relationship for that time period, typically starts with Giving Tuesday. We definitely want to like increase post and promotion across social channels, of course, across like the meta space, highlight, like Pat was mentioning, making sure that we're highlighting like giving events well ahead. Actually launch your hashtag Giving Tuesday campaign if you're choosing to do one, right? Like not every nonprofit, I don't think, needs to be making donation appeals on Giving Tuesday, which we could have a whole webinar on that alone. But if that's a choice you're making, of course you're doing it then. Um, and what we oftentimes do that I don't know if there's actually text in this webinar on is we will also sometimes run a Giving Tuesday campaign through the end of the week. So we of course don't say on Wednesday and Thursday, today is Giving Tuesday, but we oftentimes will use language like in honor of Giving Tuesday. Consider, because you've put so much work behind a potential landing page, behind a theme, behind a purpose for the campaign. Um, and it really does help get more mileage out of it. Of course, the highest day in terms of like return is going to be Giving Tuesday, but we still see reasonable mileage out of the campaign if you do choose to extend it with language like give in honor of Giving Tuesday for us. And again, it's just such an expensive day to advertise, and so doing that, the Thursday Friday cost per impressions are going to be a lot lower, and you get more mileage out of the campaign. So and then also to Pat, thoughts on crypto Giving Tuesday? Um,
Yeah. There's actually a question from Tim that I'm answering in the chat. It
oh,
ties
awesome.
back to your trough uh, piece on crypto. I mean, crypto Giving Tuesday versus Giving Tuesday. It's all the stuff that you've hit on. It's just a little more exacerbated. Um, People always ask like who gets donations on crypto Giving Tuesday. It's like, okay, millions of dollars go to charities. Where is it going? It's largely the people who did what you said, right? Like they prime their audiences and they let them know that this thing is coming, and they let them know there's going to be match dollars. So anyway, Tim's question is saying, does the trough minimize during a short campaign window, like a day of campaign, crypto Giving Tuesday, et cetera? If your focus is to minimize the trough on that one day, you definitely can. You can do things like rolling out different matches or incentives throughout the day, and you can keep things fresh that way. Um, However, sometimes the best strategy is to just accept the trough with open arms when it's a small window campaign, like a 1 day campaign. An example of that would be telling your audience well in advance, like we're going to have whatever $100,000 in match dollars, and you're running this campaign, and it's first come first serve. You let them know like starting at 9 a.m. on this day, the first $100,000 in donations are going to be matched, and it's just like concert sales. People show up, and the beginning of the campaign is the moment of focused attention. You're going to get most of your giving then, and you accept the fact that throughout the day it'll peter out a bit. That's not necessarily a bad thing for a day of campaign. For the month of December, you of course don't want something like that where you waste, the tax deadline and everything else. But for a single day, you can either try to diminish the trough by balancing things across the day, or you can accept it and know you're going to have this moment of heightened giving. Both are acceptable strategies. It just kind of depends on the charity.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I would think it's actually a great question, Tim. I don't know if I've uh, or we have dug too deep in on data around. I would imagine that it's a lot like what Pat was mentioning, where there's going to be a balloon at the beginning, maybe more of like a bell curve that's like shifted over to the left, where it's like there's a big beginning, and then I do think just because it's day based, as like time zones basically close off and people kind of like get to their evenings, they've been that would kind of just like have there be a natural lull to it. So I do think increasing, making sure that there is engagement throughout the day to remind people who maybe had the intention, but it just wasn't, for whatever reason, wasn't on their mind at the time to give. But I don't think we would see the kind of like, the ending campaign boost that we typically would see. I would imagine that it kind of just does peter out throughout the day. Um, yeah. So, and then of course we do want to keep donors engaged, right? Like we're not done um in after Giving Tuesday. Giving Tuesday is the start of the Super Bowl for us, but we have 4 quarters to play. And so now really is the time in how you get creative and how you motivate donors to give. We want to leave nothing on the table here. This is where it's an active time of year for our agency where we're supporting nonprofits who are in active year-end giving campaigns. But like I can even think of times in my career where we've like had a theme, and the theme was great at first, and then we got into the trough and we're like, okay, this is no longer resonating to the degree it was. Let's throw new kinds of appeals in there. We've been previously like very emotion focused in our appeals, and maybe with more of like a positive emphasis. Let's try some like logical appeals with statistics and facts that are negative feeling, and like just especially if you're starting to experience that trough, get creative, get into a war room with your team, and don't leave any idea on the table. Like especially when it comes to digital marketing, almost every idea is able to be tested and seen whether it, it really works or not. You do want to ramp up your investment into multi-channel communications. There's definitely still time to reach new audiences. If you are focused with a smaller budget though, it might be time at some point during December to cut new audience appeals and focus on those who are warm. So that doesn't necessarily just mean your donors, but those who have previously engaged with your campaign, who have considered giving, have made it to your website during the period of time. But if you do have a little bit of a larger budget, it still can be time to reach new audiences. And obviously, remarketing is incredibly effective. And just a reminder too about the deadline for stock donations is December 19th to use in your appeals that you're sending out. And then we get into urgency and remarketing. This is straight up where we see the highest return every time in terms of like resources in to dollars out. If you've done this playbook correctly, you've pre-wired, you've gratitude, all of it, you should be capitalizing on this period of time. This is where remarketing campaigns take full precedent. It converts audiences who are already engaging across your channels. Ideally, your budgets are more actually for this last 10 days. So even from a daily perspective, ramping up 29th, 30th, 31st, increasing on those days to match the trend that we see of people giving more on those days. And then, here's some notes. We will be sending this deck out. So if you want to kind of look through the different campaign recommendations we're making, this is them. Like we want to be running only conversion campaigns, remarketing only on YouTube and display, emphasis on branded keywords on search, because that's where people will be looking for nonprofits with your name or similar to you based on all the marketing you've been doing. And then like conversion design, high frequency, we're getting unreasonable with how much we're asking people because again, it's the fourth quarter of our Super Bowl. And then I don't know if there's anything to you, Pat, that you want to throw in.
I was just gonna say on the channel application example, this stuff is all so good. We keep running over it, but I love just speaking to it. The channel application, just from the crypto standpoint, but also stock DApp, etc. An example is we were on with maybe 30 minutes before this, Chosen International, and they're coming up with their crypto stock and DApp strategies. And as we talk about it, they always ask questions. A lot of charities do. They're like, "Where's the best place to meet crypto users?" And the answer is usually Twitter. So a lot of people focus on Twitter. That's the main place where we see posts related to Crypto Giving Tuesday. That's just where a lot of crypto users are. It's always been that way historically. Um, Thinking about your audience first and then like earning net new crypto donors second is a really important framework. So everything Michael's saying about like doubling down on your existing supporters or audience members who are at the very least warm is so important. For things like crypto and new kind of donation channels that nonprofits haven't invested in historically, there is a inclination for people to want to go outside themselves and try to find these people, right? Like where do they hang out? And they kind of start conversations like Twitter. The conversation with Chosen International is solidifying their strategy, and what they're looking at is all of the direct mailers they're sending out, making sure that there's an insert just with QR codes for stock, for DAF, for crypto, that people can opt in instead of sending a check or cash, for instance. These are existing appeals. And knowing that there's tens of millions of crypto users in the US and 100 million plus stock investors, people with DAF accounts, we're already sending it. We're already talking to these donors as people who already support us historically. It's a great place to put this as an option. They're looking at all the emails going out as a part of the capital campaign at the bottom there, just mentioning crypto stock and DAF or options, for instance. Looking at their existing donor base and shooting a note out saying, hey, remember, crypto, stock, DAF donations, right? These are options for you. Talk to your advisor, talk to us, try to figure out your tax liability. Maybe you can give us a little bit more and save a little bit more in your tax bill. Those are the things that charities should be focused on backing into. And then, right, your existing audience knows this is an option. They give if it's convenient for them. When you've checked all those boxes, it's great to go onto platforms like Twitter or Reddit or Discord, like depending on if you're trying to build that younger donor audience and try to do things like participate in Crypto Giving Tuesday. It's great to have at least one post out there on something like social. But generally speaking, just doubling down on what you're saying, Michael, look at your existing audience. If you're a big nonprofit, of course, you have lots of crypto users in your audience and everyone's got lots of stock investors. If you're a small nonprofit, the odds are you still got some in there. Make sure that they're aware first and to go try to meet those new folks second. And as the end of year gets closer and closer, when you're running out of time, of course, keep doubling and tripling down on the warm contacts who are most likely to support you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really great to I just love that we have both of us on this webinar to really give the perspective of more oftentimes at Community Boost, we're very focused on the individual donors donating cash gifts, and we're oftentimes really focused on new donor acquisition too. And then there's so much potential for capitalizing on the existing relationships or even new relationships you're forming with people who have that capacity to donate stock or donate crypto as well. So who was going to do these slides? Okay, I think this is me on this last one. But yeah, as we look at 2023 and we think about like what should we expect? Ultimately right now as we head in, giving is down 3% after a tremendous, like pretty crazy year of inflation. Total numbers of actual donors, so not just revenue, but also like number of people that have given is also down, although we are seeing the average gift size increase, which is a good sign. And then, of course, like inflation rates being high has put us at individual giving risk beyond what would be a normal year. And I think like we did see last year, some nonprofits like kind of got away with sitting and just waiting for gifts to happen. Although we also, I think most people, if you're on this webinar, you're probably pretty educated about some of the giving trends that emerged after 2022 of like some of the decreases in the space. I certainly think that those nonprofits who just sat around and waited kind of probably suffered in terms of the result to their goal. But this year, implementing innovative fundraising and marketing strategies is honestly what's going to separate the successful from the unsuccessful campaigns. And so, yeah, just really grateful that all of you are here. I also would throw in State of Philanthropy. We're in a bit of a period of like digital exhaustion for people where like news about AI is constant. It's exciting, but it's constant. The number of ads that people are seeing on these digital platforms has grown as some of these like larger tech companies have had tougher years financially, having to like monetize more through advertising. And there's just a lot of reasons for it. So if you're able to do this correctly, these challenges suddenly can turn into opportunities for you because you're standing out amidst a myriad of noise that is otherwise pretty bland and consistent. So this can be intimidating, but again, like hope you guys do see these things, these challenges, potential opportunities for yourselves. But Pat, I will pass it to you.
Awesome. I'm hitting on, I'll just answer two quick questions live. I was going to write them out in the chat, but I can hit that quick as we go. Please keep popping stuff in the chat in the Q&A, and we'll, of course, save a bunch till the end. One great question is, do you have advice for getting matching funds? We've asked hundreds of big corporations, local businesses, donors, and I'm still struggling. I largely think that, like when we talk to nonprofits, if they're like, we want younger people to come to our gala, or we're looking for a corporate partner, we're struggling to get people kind of following us on social media. What do you recommend? People are looking.
Pat, I just accidentally clicked and muted you. Tech, oopsie.
How
Sorry
dare you?
that. Yep.
You served. I don't know where I cut out on it, but it's in short, the idea should first be to make it compelling for the individual or the partner. And second, to be about your impact. I know that, of course, we want partners who are invested in our impact. We want people attending our events who genuinely want to help. If you can make, let's say, it's a walk program, whatever, you can think about like when they do FOM at college campuses where it's, a 24-hour dance type thing. That's a thing that college kids would just want to go to, right? So like it's going to generate funds because the event itself is interesting. If you're talking about partners, an example we always give is NFT artists. Trying to find an NFT artist and being like, if you want to auction off art on behalf of the charity, like we'll promote it to our audience, you promote it to yours, we'll get money. Hopefully you find new patrons, right? As a result of it, like that's something the artist would be interested in. If we go to a crypto company, we don't just say, do you want to donate to a nonprofit? We either talk about the marketing outcomes, the nonprofits promoting it, or we find a way for it to work for the company. We're like, we could do a trading fees competition. That way we're incentivizing your users to be really active that day, which would generate revenue for you. And a percentage of it goes to the charities. You might even get some new users because charities are talking about the platform and maybe some folks open an account. Get super utilitarian about it. I know it's in our gut to talk about like how many people we could save and how important it is. That always needs to be a part of it. But ultimately pick a partner based on that. If you can make it something that's fundamentally valuable to the individual, to the company, et cetera, it's the best way to get it over the line. And the impact is just the same. The more money that comes in for the cause, the better. So just try to find partners and companies and folks where you can find that alignment or come up with a thing you think would be mutually beneficial. And then finally, how do we start engaging on fundraising efforts with crypto or matching funds? Mary, I'll go through this, but if your question is how do you accept crypto, we'd of course say you open an account with the Giving Block. If you're already one of our clients, then we can send you some information on the campaign if you're not currently using the toolkits. And now I'll move forward.
Awesome.
Okay, so diversification of donors, huge strategy. Next slide. When we talk about diversifying donors, it can mean two things, which we talked about. One is diversifying the way that donors give. So it's opening more doors for existing folks within your audience to walk through. Folks who might not convert otherwise, right? The more options you give them to give, maybe they don't want to type out their credit cards. They go to something more convenient like an Apple Pay. Maybe you're offering them to grant from a donor advised fund, but they'd rather send you their crypto directly. Opening those doors to diversify your audience, both in terms of having modern ways for people to give it, right? So like send stock through a donation form in a few clicks, or more high touch, older forms, right? You've got a brokerage and you talk to an older donor, get their advisor on the phone, give them a PDF with broken instructions. The number one thing first is opening up these different options that work for younger donors and older donors alike, that work for them based on the way that they invest, the way that they behave, the way they like to transact, how they move money. That's number one, right? Is the door fundamentally open or not? There's so many nonprofits where if I go to the site, either I have to type out my entire credit card information, or it gives me an address where I can send a check, or I get a direct mailer in the mail. It's like, would you like to put money or a check in this envelope and mail it back? And I say, absolutely not. And then other times they send me something. It's again, a QR code. I completed my first direct mail appeal. I keep saying like 60 days ago because there was a QR code in it. And I hovered over the thing and it had a Chariot integration for DAF transfers. And I have a Charity Vest account and I sent money in seconds. And I was like, this is so much better. Thank you. So when I hear people say like direct mail doesn't work for younger donors, I'm like, well, it depends on how you do it. Second piece here is like earning net new donors, right? So thinking about your donor strategy in a different way. Are they giving to a specific component of your mission? Do they only give at year end? Are they giving because of the tax incentive, right? There's lots of people who work with advisors, and this year, crypto or Bitcoin, for instance, the last 12 months is up 120%. They need to make that gift before the tax deadline if they don't want that liability. It's like, they're up against the clock. They have an incentive to give this. A school recently, they had a $50,000 pledge. They reminded people that they can give crypto, and they said, can I fulfill this pledge? I was going to pay over 5 years just right now instead because it just works better for my bottom line. And of course, the school is like, absolutely. Why wouldn't you? All of these things are valuable. And then ultimately mission-based appeals versus fundraising tactics, matches, deadlines, etc. This is again what we talked about with partners. Balancing those things is so important. Just saying that you help people is really great, but people also want to have confidence in the fact that you're competent. They want to know that they're going to see where the money goes after they give it. They're going to want to know that you are good stewards of the money that they're investing in you. They're going to want to know that other donors give to you through social proofs. Think about all of the reasons that people buy things and then to try to apply that back to giving. And then think about how that varies from an older individual, a younger individual, tech forward, not so much. Try to balance that all out across.
Which is why we do the pre-wiring, right? And we really started looking at October 1st. I would say that the best nonprofits that have the best performance during year ends from that perspective of the trust has been built, the confidence in they do what they say that they're going to do with the funds is really like built all year, ideally through like consistent audience cultivation and communication. And there's an art as well to building that trust. Coming and breaking that fourth wall, being like, literally, here's why you should trust us, is also probably like not going to necessarily generate trust either. It's through that consistency in the way that you show up. And then I love that you said social proof, because like, unfortunately, that whether that really should mean anything or not, we've certainly been trained that it does this day and age.
Definitely.
Yeah.
This is super important. This is kind of a new development. We started the company in 2018. We did crypto only for a few years. The reason we got into stock and then ultimately DAF was through talking to nonprofits. We had an interesting problem for a little while, where a lot like big nonprofits. So we have now 225 of our clients are $100 million plus nonprofits, so like blue chips. And a lot of them start from this position where they're like, oh, people don't give crypto to us, which made sense to us. Crypto is kind of a newer thing that they would think that. It's like, have you ever asked for it or like put this in front of people? And it's like, no. And it's almost like you talk to a pizzeria where it's like, no one's ever ordered food here. It's like, how would they order? It's like, there's no door to the restaurant. There's no phone number. There's no email. It's like, well, all right, well, that kind of makes sense. Um, the same thing is happening with stock and DAF to a staggering degree. Some of the biggest nonprofits in the world, who I will not call out by name, when we're like, how do you fundraise like stock? And they're like, I don't even know what that sentence means. It's like, well, when you ask donors to give stock or when you provide it to them as an option, how are you presenting that? And they're like, we don't like actively present these as options. If someone calls us and says, we'd like to transfer stock to you, then we take it. It's like, would you do that with credit cards? Is always the way that we talk about it. It's like, would you just have a website with no donation appeals? And if someone were to call your headquarters at some point, you'd be like, yeah, I can write down your credit card information. They're like, no. And I'm like, well, why would you do that with literally anything? Um, so the biggest one that we then moved up to is DApps. There's $250 billion sitting in DApps. A lot of people think that it has to do with the structure and um, changes that we need to make around like forcing people to move a certain amount out of the accounts. I think there are a lot of positive changes we could make. My argument would be same reason that a lot of people weren't giving crypto and now hundreds of millions of dollars get donated. Nonprofits don't ask for this. It's like every nonprofit has people in their audience with DAF, and they should just say, hey, if you have money in a DAF account, you don't have to wait and put this in an estate plan. You could be making donations right now that could be having a positive impact. We would love if you made a contribution to our organization this year. We're trying to raise this amount, et cetera. Oh, and I see someone asking the question, what is a DAF? This is an important one. A DAF is what's called a donor advised fund. And what that means is largely because nonprofits don't show their donors that they can send things like crypto stock, et cetera, to them directly. What people will do is open these donor advised fund accounts where they move, usually investments, crypto stock, sometimes cash, into a pool. That account that they have is technically a 501c3. So they get the full tax incentive as if they've given it to a charity. And then they have unlimited time to grant it out to charities over the course of their life. So sometimes it's great, right? You've got a huge tax incentive. You're a billionaire. You want to put $150 million somewhere. You don't want to rush your choices and where that goes. It's part of your estate plan, for instance. It can be a great tool, but generally speaking, there's a lot of people who are just parking 50 grand there and giving you $10 a month because they don't even know that they could cut out the middleman and they think they'll send a grand eventually and they sit it there for 20, 30 years. So we want people, A, when they have money in these donor advised fund accounts, to actually grant it to you on an annual basis. That only happens if you ask, and 99% of charities don't even ask donors if they have these accounts or if they'd like to send a grant. And then B, whenever possible, make sure donors know they don't have to park it there to begin with. So you can give us crypto stock directly. You can cut out the middleman. You can save a bunch of time and steps. You can send it to us as easily as you enter in your credit card details. Here's how you give us crypto stock, et cetera. So DAF is super important. Future-proofing your audience is super important. We touched on the much ask or the must ask component. Future proofing is key just because 94% of crypto users are millennials and Gen Zs. The average account opener on stock exchanges now is 35. It was 50 as recently as 10 years ago. Younger people are investing more. They have stocks, they have cryptocurrency, they have a tax incentive. They're parking all of this money in DAFs because they don't think nonprofits will take it. And ultimately, whatever nonprofits establish these giving relationships are getting people who are hitting their peak earning years and ultimately the recipients of the $68 trillion Great Wealth Transfer. So if you are investing in trying to have a future-proof donor base, it's super important that you open these doors to your donors. Unique events, these are cool. Crypto Giving Tuesday and NF Tuesday are the big ones. Do not go all in on these days. We always say Crypto Giving Tuesday is the biggest awareness day for crypto fundraising. Millions of dollars tend to get given. We've had years where like 50 grand gets given on the day, depending on market dynamics. People do not make major financial decisions involving non-cash assets and investments where they're sending $132,000 to a charity to offset capital gains tax liability in a matter of seconds because you asked nicely. If you are priming your audience, if they're aware of the match, if they've talked to their advisors, you can rake in a bunch on the day by emphasizing things like a match or an opportunity to give. What you ultimately want to do is prepare them for that. Use things like match dollars when possible. If you don't have match dollars, begin telling your story on that day because it's the most likely day that someone will pick up that post and read it. And then throughout the month of December, try to drive engagement, convert those donors and ensure they get their gifts into your organization under the wire at the tax deadline. That's what the day is all about. You'll see more content that day, thousands of charities posting with the hashtag, lots of donors giving. Money will be changing hands. You don't have to post 50 times, then fall asleep at the wheel for the next 30 days. It's a really great day for awareness. but it's really just to be in telling a story. And then to Michael's point, just like every other donation method for crypto and stock in particular, everything comes into the last month of the year because people procrastinate and the tax deadline is real. So, yeah. Okay. Tailoring engagement strategies based on the donor audience. And Michael, please, just in your section, feel free to jump in if you got stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So defining your audiences is super important. Who are we talking to? This forks, right? There is your audience as it exists and who you can dig out of that audience. So we always talk about it, like we just said with email. The best thing you can do is make it clear to all the people who already like you and support you, or at least interested, they're warm, that things like crypto stock and DAF are options, or that you have a campaign, even outside of the stuff we do with the giving block, right? Figuring out like who in your audience might be interested in particular giving options, opportunities, who would go to a gala versus start a walks team. That's the first thing you should do. Take your existing audience and try to segment it. Second is, where are these people outside of yourself? If you're trying to earn net new donors, it's a different type of calculation and they should be considered separately, right? So just because Twitter, Reddit, Discord, these are places crypto users hang out, doesn't mean it should be your starting place from an appeal. You should start from your own position of strength and then define the audiences outside of yourself that you'd like to crack into an appeal to. Generally speaking, partnership or working with the people in your audience is the best way to do it. I can't tell you how many nonprofits try to build a crypto Twitter following from scratch over the course of a year. And then we see people just DMing NFT artists or people in the space a few times trying to find mission alignment. And they find somebody who's an influencer or company or project. And they just go, we could partner together on something. And they've got 30,000 followers who already really like crypto. And you're off to the races. Everyone's strategy is different, but trying to tap in is good. Developing a data strategy, super important, right? Where do your donors sit? What inspires them? I mean, Michael, on this one, from the data strategy standpoint, you guys are going to have a lot more information on this. Do you have recommendations here?
On developing a data strategy, just in general.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, yes, I could. That could also be its own webinar. I think that developing a data strategy, yeah. So I think defining, like getting a sense. It starts with benchmarking, I guess, is what I'm ultimately trying to say. Like getting a sense of how things have been performing for you, and with added effort, like uh where you want to see those numbers scale to. Um, I don't know. Actually, I'm not sure, Pat, if I can like with that context and like really nail the answer to that question. But I do think there will be opportunities to speak more to it as we go through this.
sure. No, I think that's great. It's helpful.
Yeah.
And then ultimately an engagement strategy, right? Which is how you're going to move forward based on that. Um, it's going to look different every single time. Don't just look at what everyone else is doing. I would say for developing an engagement strategy, I sit at a lot of conferences all throughout the year that nonprofits will go to. And they'll hear Save the Children talking about how they developed a campaign. And I'm seeing, you know, 50 local charities scribbling furiously into a notebook. And I'm like, there's no way that'll work. It's like, they already had 2 million followers on Twitter and they're starting, explaining how they leverage that channel. And it's like, I just see 50 people who are about to tweet it to the void for 2 weeks and then walk away frustrated. The platform doesn't work, for instance. So again, start from your own positions of strength. What are you good at? What does your audience look like? And then you can also say, what would our ideal audience look like and start inching toward that. Um, but know your strengths, right? If it's direct mail, it's direct mail. And you can double down on that for now and try to inch in the other direction. If it's email, if it's social, if you're really good at Facebook, right? But you think donors can be elsewhere, it's like always start from your own position of strength. Cool. So traditional donors versus crypto donors, very interesting. So the average age of a traditional donor is continuing to go up. They keep measuring this every year or every other year. And the number keeps increasing, even though the average age of a millionaire keeps going down. The average age where wealth is being concentrated, right? Um, it's largely driven, of course, by a small number of donors who give greatly because that's kind of how all industries work. Um, but it's also important to note that just because donors are younger doesn't mean they can't give. I think there is a big misconception in the industry, like when you look at people like crypto donors, that a crypto donor is almost like someone who would start a walks team. You're investing in them for the long term. You're probably not going to make that much money with them versus something like an older donor strategy. but you're getting them into their CRM and you're going to steward them up into major gifts as they get a little bit older and they advance into planned giving, major gifts, etc. It doesn't really look like that anymore, right? So the average crypto user, for instance, is late 20s, early 30s. They have a higher average income than any city in America. Their average donation size is usually between $5,000 and $15,000 per transaction. Um, if you're trying to create a donor in a lab that you'd like to be receiving gifts from, they pretty much tick all of the boxes. The main reason these folks aren't giving to particular nonprofits is, again, like they're not being asked for it. They go on the site, they don't see an option to give crypto. They've never seen as an option in an email. They're not being asked. It doesn't mean everyone's CRM is loaded with crypto users. It just means that like the majority of crypto donors don't exist yet because they've never met at that nonprofit intersection. There's tens of millions of users in the US, some of which are using their own tax software, like TurboTax instead of an advisor. They're not working with a wealth advisor. They buy crypto on Coinbase. They buy stocks on Robinhood. And their nonprofit doesn't ask for it. So their wealth advisor doesn't exist. Their tax advisor doesn't exist. Their charities never told them this is a giving option. They look at crypto as an investment. They don't even know it's a thing that they could donate. Um, Nonprofits having options like this available, very important, and then making it aware or making donors aware of it, the rule of seven, which Michael will get into, super important throughout the year if they're presented the option. And then if they walk through the door, right, you focus on it more, you spend more time, you steward. And if they don't walk through that door, right, you leave it up as an option, you focus on the things that make sense. But anyway, crypto donors, super high value. And when you look at the great wealth transfer, the average high value donor is getting younger, not older, even though the average donor is getting older.
And I think Pat touched on something important too, and just investing the time into creating those relationships, even if the return isn't necessarily there immediately. And it can be more difficult if you're working in a smaller nonprofit with more limited resources to necessarily justify, like, you have a goal that you have for year-end fundraising total, and to justify a certain amount of investment into an audience that may or may not even have that kind of immediate return. But I think in thinking of lifetime value is wickedly important, and I wish we had a slide on like lifetime value. And of course, like as someone is, we're going to see that larger return from someone who's around that 65 age audience because of the gift size, because of the conversion rates. There are nonprofits that we work with where either as a result of like us kind of discussing together, or even the directors of marketing, or whatever the title of the person is, coming to us and saying, we're willing to accept 20 like a 0.2 return on investment for someone who's under the age of 30, because ideally we have systems in place to actually like continue to steward and nurture that person over life. And then of course that second, third gift is incredibly easier to generate from someone who's younger. But just wanted to throw that out there. Like, I know that it can be an internal struggle at times between what maybe the people on this webinar know is right and then what leadership wants to see in terms of return this year today. And so starting that battle I don't need to frame it in a negative way, but starting that opportunity with them earlier and starting to kind of like chip away at that mindset of we maybe should be willing to call this year a quote unquote loss, but also a long-term win if we are hitting these kinds of donation metrics from younger audiences. Just a bit of a mindset shift there.
Okay, sweet. In terms of data strategy, tailoring engagement is important. I'm going to give just a simple example. We can roll through this one. So again, the Children International one from earlier today, they were talking about stewardship, right? Once you get donations of different types, it's called like crypto, stock, etc. When you get that gift, what does the stewardship look like that's different? One small example of this is just responding to the market. So this year, right, cryptocurrency is up a ton. A lot of the top cryptos are up, a lot of the altcoins are up. When you reach out to the donors who have given to you using crypto in the past, or the donors that you segmented as high likelihood of giving crypto, you can cite that fact, right? Crypto is up a lot this year. We know we have a lot of donors with appreciated investments. If giving using cryptocurrency is a part of your strategy for the year, like we'd love your support. If you're talking to your investors, right, or if you want to connect with us, the Giving Block, etc., let us know. But like consider it as part of your strategy. Like here's why some of our donors do. And then let's say during the bear market, when a lot of nonprofits kind of stopped stewarding, some of the best nonprofits like Save the Children, American Cancer, etc., they were getting notes out where they were like, "Hey, We know cryptocurrency has been down a lot recently. We're not going to send you an email saying in 24 hours, the match dollar trying to send us the money right now. If you have appreciated investments at the end of this year, because even though the market's down, plenty of people bought it earlier, you could. Then of course we'd love to be part of your strategy. But if you don't, we'd love this year to be about like building a better relationship with you or meeting more folks in the space, right? If you have other folks you'd like to connect us with, like if you want to do a meetup, an NFT drop, like something that we can do to build it in this space, we just want you to know that like crypto is a part of our funding model. We want it to play a big role moving forward. Hope your portfolio looks all right. That's an example of like understanding your audience and what's going on in the market can prevent you from accidentally being like, oh, they sent me $100,000 last year. I'm going to send them an email today asking for another $100,000 and not looking in the news and seeing Bitcoin went down 20% in the last 12 hours. It's like, could be a little tone deaf.
I mean, I also too. I'm almost getting chills from just that. Did that actually happen, Pat, or is that just an example?
What happens all the time. A lot of it, the worst thing is because it's younger donors in particular, like people segment
Yeah.
by like age and stuff like that. There's people who gave 1.2 million in crypto who got an email to give $10 a month because the person is tagged in a CRM as being like
Yeah.
a 19-year-old or whatever who's like this really successful crypto trader, and they didn't tag that it was a crypto gift and like the data was in silos. They'll segment by age and they'll send these, start a walks team to this person who's like one of the greatest contributors of all time. So how much they give, what the donation method is, like super young people, if they're an investor, like you got to treat them like a major gift prospect. And there's just a lot of, I don't know, a lack of segmentation, I would say, the data sometimes.
Yeah, and I think along with that segmentation as well, that the example and about whether it's real or not, the Save the Children email around not being tone deaf. I also think too when we talk about like how this year's played out, where there's been tremendous inflation in this country. Um, think through that as well with some of those like more long form appeal opportunities that you have too. It's like we can and we want to talk to these people like they're human beings, and so when it comes to the different ways you're thinking of segmenting your audiences, where your 30 to 40-year-olds are at versus your 60 to 70-year-olds are at in terms of like where they could be in their career, their spending habits, like all of that is worth the extra time to again have yourself stand out in this age where there is potential digital exhaustion. So I was like smiling hard internally when you talked about that example. So I really like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's important. And then Brandon just asked in the chat, like, should we be watching CNBC before ever asking for crypto donations? As a hard rule, like, look before you leave. I don't think you need to take it necessarily that far. I think it's more kind of having a general sense of where the markets are, and to Michael's point, kind of like economic conditions or uncertainty, right? Like, gauge what's the temperature of the room. Um, Sometimes there's nothing crazy going on, but like if you're sending an email the day after, right, like FTX collapsed or whatever, and you're like, now is the time to send us, it's like pay a little bit of attention to know there's not like a crazy upward swing or downward swing. Downward swing so you don't do something wild, right, and bother people or rub them the wrong way by being tone deaf. But also upward swings because I can't tell you how many nonprofits are still like convinced crypto is dead. After it's like been outperforming every asset for like well over a year. So it's just like just paying attention to the news in general, because then if it doesn't necessarily make sense to ask people for crypto in an aggressive way at particular points in time. And at certain points in time, like you should be running ads, you should be investing in SEO, you should know that there's going to be an upswing. And then other times, like right after FTX, maybe you don't have a big ad spend over the next 60 days around like people are probably looking to give this stuff away. So just a general sense of it, I would say. I don't think you need to be too anxious about it. Okay. I think we covered a lot of this stuff,
They're
Michael. I
good
know
stuff.
we're,
Cool. Okay.
yeah. This is great. So a sense of community and tap into that. Sometimes it's positive, right? Just being like, we've gotten a bunch of crypto in the past. We want this to be a part of our funding model. We think the technology is cool and we'd love your support. That's different than just asking for money. Like there's a community component there. You can also use it not in a negative way, but in a bit more of a competitive way. We've seen lots of nonprofits do very well where they're like, you know, when the Dogecoin community comes out or something kind of funny, it's like Doge donors are giving more than Bitcoin Ethereum donors. What's going on here? And people are like, absolutely not. This coin is not legitimate. We have to give money. And like people will donate because they want their particular token to continue to be seen as like the leader in some philanthropic component, or you're running a campaign, who's going to give the most Ethereum donors or Bitcoin donors. That kind of stuff can be fun. So knowing the community so you know how to tap into it is important. Giving people what they want. Michael hit on the best one. It's like, thank you is great to the individuals because it's a touch point that isn't asking them for something. I completely agree. But also public gratitude is one of the best ways to generate an audience and tap into it, right? Like when you have a corporate partner that you can thank, it's not only that you're showing donors that someone's giving money, or like a big donor, if you ask if they can thank them publicly, they get the credit and the gratitude. It also shows people that like this is a thing, and people are giving to you in this way. And when they give to you in this way, it's being acknowledged. It also encourages partners and the donors to like share it among their audiences, and you can ultimately capture more folks that way. So super important to think about that. And then doing more with less. When you don't have a ton of demographic data available in any ecosystem, don't overthink it. So for instance, if you're a nonprofit and you're just getting into this space, you can just, again, send the same capital campaign emails you're about to send over the next 60 days. And at the bottom there, it could be like, for the donors who want to give investments, right? Crypto, stock, donor advised fund grants, et cetera. These are options for you. If you're interested in learning more about these options, you can click here, right? That could be your whole strategy for a little bit and just show them the option. You don't have to find who has crypto and dig too deep into it, segment your audience. Start easy, put some feelers out, open doors, and see who walks through. Cool. And then aligning the tactics to year end. So we talked about this. This is a lot about like not falling into the trough. Don't go too hard on Crypto Giving Tuesday. Don't ask your marketing team for the whole channel for a day. People don't give all at once. Keeping donors engaged throughout the month, super critical. And then the tax deadline being acknowledged, completely essential, right? Make sure that donors know they need to get the gift in time. You can use that pressure to help people convert. And then campaign day attention. So I'll just give one quick example. The American Cancer Society did something called the Cancer Crypto Fund. They were already raising $10 million for cancer research. All they did was carve out $1 million goal of that they said they wanted to raise in crypto. They were like, it would be the first $1 million cancer grant that was strictly funded using cryptocurrency. The crypto community, of course, loved it. They raised that amount of money in a matter of weeks, and their post about it was the second best performing post in the history of the organization, with I think 12,000 retweets. It's an example of, again, making it a story. You can use things like match dollars. You can have a moment of heightened attention or establishing a goal. Don't just go out there and ask for money, right? Tell them why they should give now. If it's going to be matched, what's ultimately going to be accomplished. Every $10,000 you give, puts a kid through a clinical trial. Give some impact metrics, find some ways to motivate the donors. Engaging board members and volunteers. This is a great one. If you don't know how to talk about crypto, it's the same thing we tell people about TikTok. Ask your audience, right? We see so many nonprofits try to train up everybody on like ChatGPT or like learn how to do TikTok overnight. Just ask your audience. If everyone who works at the nonprofit, is 45, 50, 60, 70 years old, totally reasonable, right? You've got a lot of folks in your audience. You could be like, hey, you could be a campus ambassador, et cetera. It's like, who's into this stuff? And I can't tell you how many times there's like a charity that is an art nonprofit in like New York, and you go, we do galas around the city all the time to raise funds. Who's into NFTs? We like to find a way to incorporate that into our events. And then you find that person. It's like they could be like your ambassador into the space. They teach you about it. They organize it. They invite friends who are also into it. Lean on the people inside your organization and outside of it, board members, volunteers, et cetera, who might be into it. You don't have to build it from scratch. See who wants to get involved. And then peer-to-peer fundraising is great. Turn donors into fundraisers, right? It's just a thing that nonprofits, I think, skip out on. You don't even need necessarily fundraising software. This can come down to your board and everyone else. Asking people to raise money on behalf of your organization is great. And another thing, which we talked about, which is match. Tell your donors, right, when they give you a big donation, or ask them rather, can we use this as a match, right? And if you can, right, you're turning that donation into the opportunity to earn more donations. If someone wants to give you $100,000, every nonprofit should be asking, can we use this as a match? Like every time they get a big gift, if it's a big company, whatever else it is, because that 100,000 is going to be more. And whenever it's a company, or even the person on your board, let's say they have a company, then slap the company's logo on it, right? And tie all that in, and then they share it to their audiences. You've now captured a new audience and turned one donation into motivation for a pool of donors. These are the sorts of things you can do. And then if that individual who gave you the match is like running the campaign, right, they're putting up their own dollars at the beginning, tell them, right, this campaign that you're running that has your name on it, let's use your initial donation as a match to incentivize the first however many donors to get this thing rolling. Lean into your audience, right? Turn them into fundraisers and find creative ways to use their funds as match dollars and motivators. Yep. And then I've hammered this home, but tax urgency, right? If you don't message this stuff at all, they just panic and dump it all on a death. And that's why there's $250 billion sitting in there. And the vast majority of that money doesn't come out of there for like decades. So like just please, you don't have to beg for like crypto stock and everything else. You don't need a crypto campaign out of the box from scratch, but just like make sure your audience is aware of the fact that these are giving options and that there's a tax deadline, and let them hand raise themselves into it. And if they don't, that's fine, right? Incorporating stuff you're already doing, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but don't let them miss it where it's like it's too late to make that gift and now there's 12 months before they feel any sense of urgency. Use that tax deadline. It's a great opportunity to get a gift over the line.
Yeah, and the pizzeria analogy was great. I thought earlier, where it's like creating, building a door into a building is far more effort than actually just creating potentially like one page on your site, or even like another drop down in your menu of how, ways to engage, ways to give, and then doing like a couple posts or a couple targeted emails. Like it's the amount of the potential upside compared to the effort put in is so great. And there is a chance too that it turns into nothing, and maybe it doesn't actually amount to whatever on that, like that giving season. But the potential upside, it just in terms of like a risk reward analysis, is just far too great to not do it. Yeah.
Agreed. It's massive. Yep. So we hit on this. Make as many options. This goes outside of the giving block, right? Things like Apple Pay as alternatives to credit cards, whatever it is, right? If you have ways that donors might want to send you money, make sure that they're obvious. Um, Define donors and try to find those demographics, right? It's totally fine to segment accordingly, but the first thing you should do is start from an area of strength. Separate what your donor base looks like and what strategies you're good at versus what you'd like it to look like, and make smart decisions. Align your fundraising plan with your goals and the end of your calendar, right? If you've already got a crazy cool thing that you're fundraising for, you don't have to create a new campaign for each individual giving method, right? Carve out a percentage of a goal and assign it to a gift method, or find a way to tap into your existing audience. And then learn your donors' motivations, right? This comes down to the tax incentives behind things like crypto and stock. And also ultimately things like we've talked about, rewarding them with thanks, trying to acknowledge their contributions, um, maybe even just acknowledging the impact of like crypto or stock specifically. If there's something that they're interested in, try to find out how you can incorporate it.
Perfect. Well, appreciate that, Pat. And we have, just looking at the clock, we got 15 minutes. And so I might blaze through some of this. So apologies if this is quick, but we will be sending this deck out as a reminder to everyone. So this this piece, we're going to actually dive into some of the marketing strategies. So we talked a lot about like what are the overarching kind of fundraising strategies, ways to approach and think about year end from a psychological perspective. Where do we actually have the rubber meet the road in terms of how we get these messages out there? So this is a case study from us where we helped the Cancer Research Institute fundraise over $1 million during just the year-end period. So it was like, I think 31 days, we hit 1 million in online giving, which for them was a serious record being broken. What was really cool, so this is information that we got shared with them after from their CRM. 48% of those gifts were from new donors, 40% were existing, and then 12% were major donors, which is, we were really excited to see this. But looking at like, how do we do that? What was the breakdown? We really were hammering across a lot of different channels at the time. So we were on meta advertising, paid Google, and Microsoft search ads. So yeah, both of those channels, Microsoft meaning Bing, Yahoo, and those other search engines that Microsoft owns. Google display ads, YouTube ads, Twitter ads. We were, of course, email marketing was incorporated in there. And then there was direct donor outreach, which really needs to be part of every campaign strategy that is not necessarily digital. That's where we're picking up the phone and actually like getting on calls with people. So first and foremost, if you've been around the space, you've been around Community Boost at all, you're aware of the Google Ad Grant. The Google Ad Grant is free advertising on search for nonprofits. Google offers up to $10,000 to have your mission on the very front page of Google when people search for things related to your nonprofit. So don't have the time to necessarily get into this, but guys, if you're not using the Google Ad Grant or don't have it and you're a 501c3 and you're not a brick and mortar school or a hospital, like there's very few nonprofits out there that don't qualify for it. You're crazy. Like take advantage of free ad spend. It's $120,000 of free ad spend per year. It's a lot. So, um, Google and YouTube are incredibly powerful channels for either showing up when someone's already thinking about something. So if your organization does something, especially if it's more niche, we want to always have ads available on Google search for people who are thinking like I actually want to give to that certain specific niche. I'm going to the internet to like find a nonprofit that does this. If you're not there, you're just straight up missing eyeballs on your website and they're going to somebody else's instead. And of course, with like paid search or Google search in general, we want to get it really tailored down so that we're not spending any ad spend on kind of superfluous or more tangent things, but having that strategy there is really important. Yeah, we honestly are pretty strong-willed that paid search ads are kind of a must during year end. It replaces the ad grant because the ad grant oftentimes when there's more heavily competitive keywords that are being searched for. So there's a lot of nonprofits out there paying real money to bring people through to their site who are searching to donate to a nonprofit. While the grant is great, Google is a for-profit company, and they are going to take that ad spend from another nonprofit who's spending real money over your grant dollars almost every time. So investing in this makes a lot of sense. YouTube is incredible, especially if you're an organization that has pre-existing video content that you believe in. The targeting capabilities of the platform are mind-boggling. You can target people who have been recently searching for something similar to what your organization does because Google owns YouTube. And so they share that information about what people are searching for. Of course, there's remarketing, people that have been on your website. You can target people by the channels that they're watching. So if there are channels out there, you're a nature focused organization and someone's watching something on a channel that is related to nature content, you can do that. And there's more. I could again do a whole nother webinar on purely YouTube and why it's incredible. If you have strong video content out there already, you really should be investing some for YouTube advertising. There's also so much more mileage you can get out of video content if you have it. YouTube, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. I'm sure it even has potential strength in even making like a crypto appeal on Twitter, if you've built up and cultivated that audience too. So for Google Display, which for those who aren't familiar with the terminology, is kind of those banner or skyscraper ads that we see across the internet. And they are just really strong reminders. Pat mentioned that I would throw back in the 7 touch points at some point, so here it is. We really do want to make sure that repetition for a campaign is there during highly competitive times for people. So year end, that's when most nonprofits are fundraising. We want to make sure that if someone is considering a gift to us or they become aware of the campaign that we're running, that we are continuing to push that message in front of them. The cost per impression display ads is incredibly low. So especially even if we're working with a smaller budget, we dial in the audiences that we're targeting in terms of remarketing, and we're making sure that we're giving it our all to push that person across the finish line. And you'll notice here kind of a variety of different ads, right? So this was all one campaign that we ran with them. And the theme here was I'm the answer to cancer, but we didn't purely rely on that flavor because again, throwing the kitchen sink at it, pulling out all the stops. If that wasn't resonating with the user, we did want to have other things that we had used previously that we knew were kind of tried and true. And so one other thought as well is testing static versus responsive display campaigns. Static means not able to be changed, only going to be one size. They're all pre-designed. So these here that you see on the left are all graphic designed, pre-created. And then these ones on the right here are ones where we've fed a variety of images, headlines, descriptions in, and then Google went ahead and created these. And yeah, there's pros and cons between the two of them. The cool thing about responsive, they obviously don't look as nice, although this ad does look pretty good here on the top right. You have the ability to design far better looking ads with static, but because Google is in control of all the different shapes and sizes it can create when it's responsive, you're ultimately going to generally see a lower cost per impression because it can fit it into some of those unused spots on some of the websites that are out there. Yeah, so, oh man, I love this so much. So with meta advertising, before you launch a campaign, if you have the resources and time to do this, I mean, honestly, I think you should create the resources and time to do this if possible. Test your donation appeal before you actually start the campaign. So there are ways to segment audiences inside these advertising platforms that mean you're not exposing your entire community, your entire audience to the campaign that you're running. But for breaking this $1 million 31 day of giving with Cancer Research Institute, we actually tested different kinds of imagery, different kinds of appeals with a very small audience we segmented on the platform to say like, hey, we had all these different ways we could approach the creative for year end. This one literally, this people voted with their wallets that this one was the most impactful for them. Highly recommend doing small batch donation messaging testing prior to year end, prior to really like any major campaign that your organization is running to do fundraising. We'll send this deck out. Here's some examples of gratitude ads. Do them. And yeah, it just, here's some free content to give you some inspiration later on when you're doing it yourself. When it comes to these like conversion ads, some examples from some of the organizations we work with on like promoting Giving Tuesday, on urgency, so calling out there's only 2 weeks left of the year, and why does that matter, right? Like what is the implication of there only being 2 weeks left in the year? Clearly for some audiences that is also going to need to incorporate that tax deadline reminder or the crypto giving reminder too, so keep all that in mind. And then, you know, when possible, incorporating impact amounts, as Pat's mentioned multiple times, into your appeals, and actually calling out like a specific day is helpful too. Yeah, so just some creative ideas out there for your inspiration potentially. And yeah, we ideally want to be increasing our communication to a point across different channels from that omni-channel perspective. And then of course there is a area of diminishing returns. And so we generally think about like 7 to 9 touch points when it comes to a user being in kind of that sweet spot where any more appeals won't necessarily annoy them or frustrate them, but maybe won't have the best return for us. And the other, I guess, I really think that it's important to emphasize not just having that all be blasted at one user on one platform, right? So one user seeing the same meta ad 9 times is a lot different of a flavor and appeal than a user seeing a meta ad from you 3 times over a month, a couple ads on YouTube with like really rich video content, and then some banners on display, as well as a few emails, right? I think there's also a psychological feeling for people where some of the best brands in the world, whether they're nonprofits or for-profits, often have a presence across all these channels, right? Like you can't go a week without seeing an ad from Coca-Cola, basically, and not to compare Coke to the nonprofit space, but I do think that you having presence on more of that omni-channel approach is going to be how you gain, you know, even like subconscious trust with people. And also how you're going to be able to achieve this sweet spot without having people feel like you're flooding one specific platform for them, and starting to get desensitized to your appeals. And then when it comes to conversion rate optimization, conversion design, I think it kind of blows my mind sometimes that so much thought goes into creating a website, and this can be for nonprofits or for-profits, and then the website gets created oftentimes with a lot of subjective input that's like one thing could have gone another way, but it got finalized the way that it did, and then nothing ever gets tested. It's like the website just is the way that it is, and the key pages where we're making the donation appeals, we're talking about our mission, we're, you know, all those pages that people are ultimately investigating before making the decision to actually give or not are never being tested. And you know, in addition to conversion rate optimization with tools like Optimizely that like will allow you to test variants of your website with the imagery, the copy, we also are really big believers in conversion design, which are little tools, and oftentimes they're called like pop-ups, scroll boxes, smart bars, etc., to nudge users in a specific direction. And so with these, you know, there's so many different reasons you would want to use these during a year-end fundraising season. We want to highlight things like how much time is left until Giving Tuesday. Outside of year-end, offering people a really easy way to jump into your, we never really want to call it a newsletter, but to follow along with your nonprofit to receive exciting updates in their inbox, versus maybe scrolling to the bottom of your website to like find your passive newsletter appeal. Conversion design goes in the offensive and says, if there are this many, this many thousands of users visiting our website, and our goal is to move them down the marketing funnel here, it is creating more intentionality between users converting through every step of that funnel. So happy to talk afterwards if anyone's like, what platforms do you guys use to do this, or anything on the technical side, because of course there are good and bad ones for actually doing this.
This is so important, Michael. Just one small thing on this: like
Yeah,
if you have someone in your life who loves you enough to do it, who is not in the nonprofit sector, give somebody like a scavenger hunt too, because it can be so helpful. I can't tell you, like we've done this before. There are nonprofits, most nonprofits we talk to, they have menu items that are like legacy giving or planned giving, like a term that a donor would never think of or use. And then there'll be a menu where it's like other ways to give, ways to support, ways to get involved. And it's just like, where would you go to find this stuff? And like, just give it to someone who has nothing to do with you and be like, can you figure out how to give me this type of donation? If you gave me money, where would you think it goes based on what you're seeing on our site? Like, give them some questions like that and get the answers and see if you can, positively impact your overall flow. And then, of course, like these types of effective conversion design elements all compound that once you have a flow that actually works. But make sure you don't have like 15 menu items that all kind of sound like they mean the same thing, because that could be killing conversion too.
absolutely. And I just can't emphasize enough, like testing your key web pages, you guys. Like if you're spending whatever you are on advertising campaigns to drive to landing pages, you're already testing imagery creative on all those ads, but then the landing page is one specific, like one solid thing, and there are either like completely free or really inexpensive tools out there to like, is this, this is a campaign that we ran during the Tijuana border crisis a few years ago. Um, and we tested this headline to death using a landing page builder. And this ended up being what worked the best in terms of generating interesting gifts from people. But yeah, I really want to hammer that home. I know we're basically out of time here, so I'll kind of just jump through this real quickly. We are going to send this out, so please watch this video. This video is incredible when it comes to, gotta exit out to like skip that, when it comes to talking about how different appeals literally affect people's brain and their psychology. And art is really important when it comes to thinking about storytelling related to fundraising. But ultimately, we know that people give to people, not to organizations. So always keeping the focus on your mission, on the impact. I know that that's not necessarily news for a lot of people who are on this webinar, but yeah, yeah, just for the sake of time, got to keep going here. Ultimately, we know that stories unlock empathy. We know that nonprofits truly have the most powerful stories to share, and it's really up to us as marketers to tell those stories in a way that directly inspire action. Um, and as much as we can, we want to be translating stories into copy that moves people, not just in ads, but also on your landing pages. Um, and please do reach out to me or the Community Boost team as well if you'd like more examples of how to do this. We've been developing blueprints and playbooks on how to actually do this for years now that are backed by data. And yeah, so from an overview perspective in terms of strategies, we want to be ramping up omni-channel marketing, meaning not just focusing on one specific thing. And I think Pat earlier mentioned playing to your strengths. If you have a community built in one area, definitely put your most energy behind that, but then also begin taking baby steps across other areas so that you are able to achieve more of that omni-channel approach, but then also you're less vulnerable to certain platforms or channels becoming weak in the future too. Use conversion rate optimization to convert more website traffic into donors straight up. Like if you can increase the conversion rate of your donation page even by half a percentage point, that can oftentimes be tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then of course people are giving because they want to make a difference, and unlocking that empathy with storytelling is really important. So
I want to, Michael, I just want to hit on one
yeah,
thing because we're at 3:30.
for sure.
You talked about at the beginning of it. If there are folks on this webinar who haven't been to the Community Boost Marketing Summit, We use Go. The first time that we were brought on as a speaker, it was me, it was American Cancer Society, Save the Children. There were like 980 people in the room. It's a super legit conference. There's a lot of people there, and the content was amazing. Like it was the best speaker lineup I've seen in a while. The content was actually awesome. It wasn't just like bought out by vendors, which like some conferences obviously look like. It's an amazing event. So if you're not going to that again, there's free sessions you can go in and participate. It's definitely worth being there. And if you haven't talked to the community boost team at all, again, they do a really good job of a pointing out like the free tools that are available to you, and then b constructing a plan that you can actually see if it's going to work before you decide to invest in it. Like we've been working with them for a while, and I just want to again like shout you guys out for the work that you do, both on the conference and with your clients. I know we had some slides we couldn't get to. Sorry for talking so long, but I want to make sure I hit that in the last minute.
I really appreciate that, Pat, and it's such an honor to host the nonprofit marketing summit from just like a dream of an idea a few years ago to now what it's become. Um, and I definitely would be remiss if I didn't also shout out the Giving Block too for creating a space that without you guys may have gone untapped for years more, and the amount of impact you've been able to help organizations create by like by making it so easy and seamless. And I think what I love about you guys too is it's not just that the platform exists, but it's also the degree of coaching and your commitment to helping educate organizations on the opportunity that's really there. Because crypto and that entire world, even we got questions of like, what are donor advised funds? Like very valid questions. And I think that education piece that you guys do is so wonderful. So um,
Thank you. We didn't plan this part where we compliment each other for the last minute of the
no, yeah,
presentation.
we might actually like end up liking each other after this. That would be interesting. But yeah, we would love to know too, just more formally, like if you would love to have more of a conversation with us on either front, please do fill this out, and this will help our team make sure that we do follow up or not follow up with you. Um, and I just also want to thank everyone too. I know there's about 30, 40 participants left in the room. 90-minute webinar, that's a time commitment. You've all got a full plate, and I just want to like thank and honor all of you for taking the time out of your day to come and learn something potentially new. And I think it's both of our hope that you did achieve that and learn something new that can really help drive more fundraising for your organization.
I completely agree. And shout out to Candace and Katie for creating the presentation that we get credit for. Content's amazing. I think we probably had a few too many slides, knowing how long I talk. So we'll tune that up for the next one.
Yeah, you and I both elaborate, which I think is a good thing, you know. So we'll figure that out.